Jody Lindsey, Choctaw County, Butler, Alabama. Growing up in Butler was, it was just a laid back kind of thing. I'm a neighborhood brat. And most of our friends were also neighborhood brats, and we would literally stand in my driveway and yell across the neighborhood or whistle because, we could all whistle. And that was our signal to meet down at the bottom of the hill for us to and we stayed out all day long playing. Wherever we happened to be at lunchtime, that's the family we ate with. Somebody was always cooking. It didn't matter if it was my mom or her daddy. It was everybody's mom and daddy. It was just a great place to grow up. I knew early on, growing up, that I just had this, desire to help others. And so I kind of went back to nursing school. I wasn't the traditional student. I was, in my 30s. My daughter, Micah, was already born, and, I was married, to Wendell, and we just talked about it and decided that, if this is something you want to do, he encouraged me to do it. My parents encouraged me, like I did. So I went back to school at about 35, maybe 34. I had to get a few basics, and then I had to apply to nursing school at UWA. Go Tigers. I was accepted, and I went through the associate's degree program. It was about 18 months after I finished all of my, prerequisites, and I graduated in 97, and I practiced as a nurse until 2023, which is currently in March of 2023. I worked most of my career as a hospice nurse, where you just take care of the terminally ill patients. And I did it for about 15 years, which far exceeds the burnout rate. And people often ask me, how did you deal with, death and dying that long? And my answer is, it's like the Sunday school answer, but it's true, it was my calling. I felt it was important for terminal patients to have the same type of, dignity and compassion that you would give for patients in a traditional curative setting. There's no cure for these people, but they had the right to die with dignity. And they had the right to make choices of where they wanted to die, a hospital, or maybe they wanted to die at home where family can easily come in and out. And, it was just important for me to make, that experience, whatever the patient wanted it to be. And it's always been important to me. People are important. I have a strong sense of responsibility of taking care of others. And so I did that. During the course of that, though, after I left hospice, which was in July of 2015, and people often ask, I cannot believe you left hospice. But what happens here is, yes, it was my calling, but God will call you to do different things. So I Choctaw General, and it was like therapy, group therapy, and the therapy was delivered not by me. It was by a licensed clinical therapist. And then I would be the nurse coordinator, manager of the program, and we would help people deal with, all kinds of behavioral issues, depression, anxiety. Every now and then we would have some patients that came in with a diagnosis it was pretty severe, schizophrenia, but now they were managed well on their medications. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to be in a group setting because we had to have some structure. And I was a little uncomfortable with that at first, but what I mean by that is when I would go out with, the therapist at the time, it was, just a wonderful friend of mine, Jill Whitaker. We actually ended up becoming just so close. I still have contact with Jill. I always told her I was very uncomfortable with asking one particular question, and this was it. Have you ever thought about killing yourself or hurting others? I was really uncomfortable. So Jill worked with me, on that, and what she taught me was, you can't fear these questions because the answers to these questions are real to these people. She said, more than not, you're going to get, yes, I have. And she said, and that's what we're trying to help them deal with. And so we have to bring truth. And she said, it's normal for you to be afraid of that. She said, because you just never, it's not something that you have in everyday conversation. And I didn't have it with my hospice patients, but it's just something I was very uncomfortable. But after 8 years of working in that program, it just became like second nature. And when they did say yes, and they would tell me what they did, every time it would bring a tear to my eye because I would think, how sad that there is something in this person's life that made them want to end their life. And so I would go, what can I do to help that not to happen again? And so I grew in my ability to communicate easily with these patients, that I called them my children. It was like the same patients over and over. They just stayed with us because mental health is not like a physical health. It's something you battle for a long time. I mean, my own mother had a short stay in there. Your grandmother.
Yeah.
And she was such a dear lady. I loved her dearly. So that was wonderful. The only, it really wasn't very hard. It was a smooth running program. It was just really interesting. And then, everybody knows what happened in 2020, COVID hit. And so we couldn't bring these people together in a group, which I felt like was the absolute wrong thing to do because you're still treating your other patients. But they, and I get the protective measures had to be in place, but I always felt like because it was behavioral health, mental health, that they just didn't give it enough attention, and they just shut it down too quickly. Now, I forgot, I did go back to school while I was working as a nurse in the behavioral health program, talked to my family, and I decided I would apply to the bachelor's program at the University of Alabama. Roll Tide. And so here I am, a 56-year-old woman who's been out of school for 30 years, and I'm going back to school at the University of Alabama, and I really didn't understand why I was doing this. My thoughts at the time were I would get my bachelor's degree, I'd go on to master's, and I'd be a nurse practitioner. That was in my head. So I started school August of 2019. September the 2nd of 2019, I've not even been in school a month. My mom died of a stroke. She had a stroke. And 14 hours later, she was gone. And I thought, how am I ever going to do this? I've got studying to do. I've got to bury my mom. But it kind of kept me focused on school. It didn't leave my focus to just stay on mom's death, because I had my dad to take care of. Well, 6 weeks after that, my brother died unexpectedly. And then I really was questioning, what am I even doing in school? But after talking to my family, we decided, you just stay on this course. So I did. When I got through it, Travis, I looked back and I thought, I can see what God was doing now. And that's really the way it is. You don't always see what God's doing when you're in it, but after you come through it, you do. And I thought, well, He brought me to this to help me deal with all this death and to keep me focused on my work, to keep me focused on my mission and my calling, but to also make me a healthier person so I could focus on my family. Sought His guidance, and one day the Choctaw Advocate was laid on my desk, and I never really read that paper. I would kind of look at like photos and stuff, but I was immediately drawn to a job application. And one of the requirements was a bachelor's degree. Now, they didn't say a bachelor's degree in what. They just said a bachelor's degree. And I went, I have one of those. So I read it, and they were looking to hire a new emergency management director and an emergency 911 call center director. I was interested. So I went by the courthouse that afternoon and picked up an application, talked to my husband about it, and I knew that if this was going to happen, God was going to have to be in it, because I didn't have any experience per se, but I have a lot of experience in taking care of people, and I felt like that's really the same thing. And I think the bachelor's degree in nursing and my associate's degree in nursing and my years of practice in nursing has got to be beneficial. So went through the process of doing that. Most of the applicants were male. I think they interviewed 2 or 3 females. And at the end of it, they hired me. So that's where I am currently. I am currently Choctaw County's Emergency Management Agency Director and the E911 Director. And I've been there almost 4 months. It has been challenging. It's going to be challenging for a long time, but I'm having a ball.
That's awesome.
It's awesome, and I still get to take care of people.
Okay.
The biggest thing that helps me is just the ability to, in nursing, you're always triaging. You have to take care of the sickest patients first. When I was developing my schedule to go around and see my hospice patients, they're all equally sick. I'm not saying one was sicker than the other, but it depends on their symptoms at the time. So you have to triage, and you have to be able to coordinate that, and you have to be able to manage all the other workers that are a part of the hospice team, which is the nursing assistant, which provides personal care, the chaplain, the social worker to deal with any kind of social and financial needs. So my ability to coordinate as a case manager for patients is kind of the same process that I'm using for county management. You just kind of have to take the priority at the time, but you also have to have a plan, for your biggest catastrophe all the way down to your smallest one. And I don't want to minimize anyone's catastrophe, but I'm talking about in terms of numbers of people affected. Obviously, I would have to bring in more resources if we had like a county-wide issue as opposed to just a small sector. But that small sector would still receive all of my attention and all of my resources just like they would. So the organizational skills helped me to be able to coordinate and manage things. Now, I still have a long way to go there. I'm developing. Prior planning prevents particularly poor performance. You cannot go into manage a situation if you're not prepared for it. And some of these things, we already prepare for them. In the height of, the storms like we just came through, and we lost a lot of power. Well, people were already prepared for power losses. A lot of citizens have generators, backup generators, or they have battery-powered flashlights. They have ways of receiving weather warnings. So preparedness is everything. There's many little things, and you don't have to spend a ton of money to be prepared for any type of emergency situation. But you can certainly make it easier on yourself. Tornado warnings. I know Tuscaloosa had a really bad day. Was that in 2011? It was awful. And so to prepare for things like that, it's absolutely imperative that you listen to and heed the warnings and don't just go, it's not going to happen. Because all it's got to do is happen to one person and it's a catastrophe. So pay attention to those warnings. Even on smaller levels that we don't consider to be catastrophes, the current heat wave we're in. We've been under extreme heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. They say, well, stay out of the sun, Stay indoors between 10 and 2. Well, you can't always do that if you work outside, but there are things you can do. Oh, you got to think. You don't just run in there and do this. Preparedness is everything. Preparedness saves lives. Preparedness saves property, and it saves infrastructure. And at the end of the day, that's what emergency management is all about, is preventing loss of life, preventing destruction to properties, and maybe I shouldn't say preventing, it's mitigating. The hardest thing about this job, and I think it was the hardest thing about even being a nurse, is you're not going to save everybody. Yeah. We had a fatality and a fire my first week here. We had 3 fatalities in wrecks, and then just last week we had another fatality in a house fire. My desire is to save everybody, because that's what I want to do, and that's a good thing. It's good to be that way, but it can also, it's a double-edged sword, Travis, because you're not going to save everybody. That's the hard part for me, is I wasn't able to do anything to help these people. And then their families suffer. It's important for me to make contact with these family members after these tragedies have happened, just to let them know, not on an emergency management basis, but just that somebody cares. I'm a county official. It's an unelected, but I'm still a representative of this county. But first and foremost, I'm a representative of the people. The hard part is not being able to save everybody. And that's all you want at the end of the day. But you have to learn how to reconcile the losses. And the way I reconcile, I spoke to it earlier, is my faith in Jesus Christ. A long way to go there. I'm developing and collecting items so I can have a functional emergency operations center. It's located at the Choctaw County Courthouse in my office. It's just an extension of my office. You have to kind of look ahead and see what types of things that you might need. Tarps, for instance. We recently had a series of storms and lots of trees came down. I would say 40 trees across the county. Power was knocked out. About 90% of Choctaw County, in terms of Black Warrior, they were without power. Black Warrior lost 20 power poles and I think about 6 transformers. So it was a big deal. So I have tarps that I can go out and help cover holes in ceilings until they can till the rain goes away, or till somebody can get out there and help patch it. Wrecks, I've worked several wrecks where we've had fatalities, and mostly my role there is traffic control. Try to keep it moving as best you can. Try to keep the first responders safe. Just making sure you're out in front of that wreck far enough that someone can't just happen up on it. That's very dangerous. So I do that. I'm even dispatching now. I'm not a dispatcher. I have no experience at it, but I want to learn. And my dispatchers have been wonderful, and that they're very patient, and they're actually teaching their director, which, it doesn't matter what your position is. You can always learn something, and you learn the most from those workers. And that's who you learn from. So I'm learning to dispatch. I'm learning the 10 codes. It's a different language, but nursing was too. And I ended up mastering that. So I feel like I will with this too. At the end of the day, it's still taking care of people, and it's taking care of people in your home county. That's a privilege and an honor.